Welcome to Awaken and Power TV. I'm your host, Ethan Fox. Today I'm joined by Dr. Simon Atkins. Today we're speaking about a variety of fascinating topics, including wave X and its influence on our global consciousness. We also delve into his personal life journey, and he reveals to us some very interesting early life experiences that he's never spoken about in an interview before. And we discuss a lot of things that are happening on a global scale, including CERN and what the real reason was for that, and the evolution of consciousness and where we are headed in the future. So without any further delay, here's Dr. Simon Atkins. Hello, Simon. Welcome to Awaken and Power TV. It's a pleasure to have you here and to finally get to know you. I've heard a lot about you from a lot of my viewers. First of all, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me.
Yeah, it's really great to be here today, Ethan. It's not only a privilege to join all of your viewers worldwide, but hopefully this show will inspire others to take some proactive risks in things that we're going to speak about.
Yes, definitely. Well, first, I'd like to, I'm sure a lot of my viewers know who you are, but for those who don't, and even for those who do, I'd like to hear a little about your life journey and some of and I even including maybe things that you knew as a child that later came into influence in the life that you're living now. I know you have a lot of very unusual background and expertise, and so I'm curious how that all wove together, and if there were any earlier experience or even life-changing moments that led you down the road to where you are now.
Yeah, well, I actually counted 7 questions there, so I'll try to keep them in order in my head there. No, I have had a very interesting life, and I have so much gratitude for that, Ethan. I think that that's probably my favorite word, gratitude. I go to bed each night saying that right before I go into these proverbial dream state, another set of dimensions, which I hope we'll talk about today. And I also wake up saying gratitude because it really is an energetic expression of heart-aligned thanks to the universe for living life to the fullest. And I've had a couple of near-death experiences which have obviously altered my life, but something that not a lot of people know about, and in fact, this might be the first time that I think I have ever said this on air, is that I was in touch with cosmic life, other cosmic journeying entities as a child. And remember, from a scientific viewpoint, which is what I am, I'm an atmospheric scientist. I'm also a macroeconomist, and I'm also a natural medicine practitioner down here in Montevideo, Uruguay, where I spend most of the time in each year. It's kind of a subject talking about quote unquote aliens that is just not accepted in mainstream life. But there have been specific things happen in 2015 that has awakened all of us. And I hope we'll also get into that today, that I now feel more comfortable in sharing this with thousands and also millions of people that have had very similar experiences. So, for example, I was born in just north of London in the good old town of Rugby, or Rugby as they say back then. And it's actually where the sport began. Rugby sport began in, I guess, the 19th century or even before that in rudimentary form. And then we moved to London when I was a couple of years old, and we stayed there until I was about 10 years old. And my dad at the time was working for Associated Press, AP, and he was on the telecommunications side. So he was always traveling a lot. And only about, probably Ethan, about 6 to 8 weeks of the year, I'd get to see him, out of 52 weeks. So I grew up mainly with my dad traveling, but he would always, without fail, on every trip, send one of those little postcards. Remember ones in the 70s or 80s that used to have the Pan Am or the TWA, big jumbo jet just flying in the sky. And if you remember back then, right, the airplanes were a really beautiful way to travel. I mean, it was almost considered first class. It's nothing like it was is today. But to get to the point is he sort of made me dream about, wow, he was in Russia, or wow, he was in South Africa, or he was in Brazil. And as a kid, I had no idea where these places were, but he'd always tell me to look up on the map. And fast forwarding you to today, I just accomplished my 71st country, traveling around this beautiful planet. And I say it's a beautiful planet because mainstream media often makes us think that it's full of war, it's full of chaos. Don't go outside your average boundaries. And I'm here to say, with sort of, really a big, loud voice, get out there, dream big, because literally the world is your oyster when you think in the vibration of love and joy. And what I mean by that is that when you change your thoughts, something that I learned as a kid, and now I term it as cerebral energetics. It's the expressing the mind as an energy wave. And when you learn to shift your life in thinking in joy and love, you can actually create a lot of abundance.
I'd like to delve a little more about what you said earlier about your early experiences with extraterrestrial beings. What exactly was that like?
I knew you'd center in on that because I said that I haven't talked about that much. Well, it began at the age of 7. And this is something, Ethan, that I remember like the back of my hand. It was just like yesterday. And essentially, it happened only 9 times. And I remember the number of times, I remember everything that's happened. And I think for many, many years, I didn't recall anything because it was either blocked because of my lack of awakening, or it was a trauma in my brain that just wasn't ready to be revealed to me to show what I'd gone through. So, I wouldn't say that I was taken, but it seems to be that cosmic life chooses certain people that have multidimensional awareness. Now, this may seem like a big term, but it actually encompasses millions of human beings on the planet that have multidimensional awareness. It's not only the ability to have clairvoyance or sort of telemetric psychometry or bilocation or the ability to levitate. It's the ability to actually change an energy wave in its form. So, for example, if you want to create $100 out of thin air, it actually is possible. I mean, it's not like, I'm going to do this on air, right? And just, take $100 out of the ether. But it's the belief system that I can always be having and needing whatever I am thinking about in a proactive way. Let me say that in an easier term. If I don't have, for example, in this case, if I don't have enough money and I need the money, then I have to go on the other side of needing that money. In other words, I have to go into the future tense and say I'm paying a bill. I have to go in the future tense that the bill is already paid, rewind the tape in that multidimensionality, and actually close my eyes and imagine that that bill is paid. So, for example, let's say I take the bill down to the local supermarket and it has a stamp on it, with the digital code of actual payment. I imagine that and I actually say, okay, this is created and I believe in that payment. And when you get to such a strong belief, it's kind of like falling in love. It's that type of strong energy field that you believe the actual payment is made, then it is done and it's created. Now, let's go back to as a child. When I was visited multiple times, I would sit up in bed and I would point in the corner of the room and I couldn't talk. For some reason, my vocal cords, I don't think it was fear. It was almost like an energy wave from these cosmic beings were actually coming into me so that I was talking telepathically. And what they showed me is that the telepathic thought is sort of in a cube fashion. It's in a cube shape, but it's multidimensional. And so, for example, when somebody receives telecommunication in a telepathic form, it actually comes like, and it's so much information that it's actually harder to receive it than to send it out. So you could say like a prayer, for example, please don't, allow my uncle to die. You can actually send this in telepathic format and go through his whole life and actually create any part of the story that you want to create for his wellness and into his future. And you can actually put that into like a package and then send it up, so to speak. And this is what this alien life, but I call them cosmic journeying entities. And they would visit me multiple times between 7 and 10 years old. And it was 9 times. And the only time that it was traumatic was when I was fighting in my mind being there. Because let me make something very clear, and I appreciate you listening to this soliloquy. I was not physically taken. And this is where in a multidimensional verse, it's really, really important to understand. And I've looked back on this and studied it now as a scientist, to the best ability I can. What happens is that you go first into what we call a dream state. Now, most allopaths and most scientists say, well, we don't quite understand what happens in sleep. And that's actually hard, that's actually bar humbug. We do understand a lot more than is said in mainstream media. It's the entry point at the time where we go into quote unquote sleep. It's the entry point into a multidimensional space. And it's probably as much as up to 7 or 8 or even 9 dimensions, depending on how deep you go. And actually, time travel is very much able to do in that dream state. So when you actually plug into that dream state, you're actually going back to the source where we are seeded from. And that's any number of points around the universe. And as you can tell in this discussion, we're getting very, very deep into our origins. And this is what I was shown. And it's almost like it's marked so deeply in your brain when you are, quote unquote, taken by these cosmic journeying entities. And I used to think, Ethan, that they did this in a malicious way, because the one time that I was very much in fear was when I was fighting being with them. And I was held down by these kind of electromagnetic rings. There was no straps. There was nothing physical. Intelligent beings beyond the human race, some of which may have actually seeded us here on Earth, and that's a whole nother discussion in and of itself, actually understand energy. They understand wormholes and portals. I mean, if this is one part of the universe and this is another, they realize they don't have to go in a ship and travel, at the quote unquote speed of light, which isn't which is actually non-existent. They just proved that there is no speed of light. It changes, but they don't have to travel between A and B. They just literally lap over this dimension, kind of like a piece of paper. If I want to go from point A to point B, they just put the 2 points together and they bilocate. I mean, that's the simplest way of explaining it. So, it's a shame to say, because we have so much belief in spaceships. What are they, glued together by glue or big iron bolts or even better electromagnetic forces? My point is here, as I was shown very, very clearly as a child, that these beings can bilocate because they understand and can manipulate the energy in a multidimensional universe.
So these were extra-dimensional beings. They didn't actually physically appear to you. They were appearing more of in an extra-dimensional, almost an altered dream state, correct?
Well, yes and no. So we think that physical means being, right here, right now in this space. But in a multi-dimensional space, you can be in different places at different times. And I say at different times because when there is no time, you've only got the space fabric of the universe. And it's an electric universe. And so I mean, it almost makes you go nuts thinking, well, if there's no time, how do you actually travel? And so there is no travel. There is these beings, yes, were multi-dimensional beings, but they can be in any location physically. So they were actually in front of me. But because I was in that higher dimensional state, they were in that dimensional universe which I was in. So this is the reason, I think, why, for example, let's go walking in the park, we're in 3 dimension, why we're not seeing most cosmic journeying entities. Now, there is an exception to this. People have filmed multi-dimensional beings, or just quote unquote aliens. And there's obviously a lot on YouTube. There's a lot of fake ones, but there are some real ones. And the ones that are real actually will move through a dimension. So for example, this is how you explain ghosts. So let's say that this hand represents the 3D universe that we live in. When a ghost or a spiritual person that has obviously moved on or died in the shell body form comes through this dimension, they are these fingers coming through. But notice it gets locked. So they'll keep trying to come through, but the 2 different dimensions are not compatible. So they will not be able to get through, and they'll keep on showing, unshowing, not showing. This is why people see all these ghosts in the castles in Europe, especially England, whereby they show and then they go out and they show, they don't, they're trapped. It's because those 2 dimensions are not congruent. Now, these interdimensional aliens, these cosmic journeying entities, as they call them, have learned which dimensions are congruent. So they can easily pass through without getting locked in and go backwards and forwards.
Well, essentially, aren't we all existing on all dimensions at all times? It's just
we are.
Our awareness is not to where we're consciously aware of all. I mean, some of us are, but a lot of us are not yet at that point where.
I couldn't have said that any better. It's the fact that we're not aware that we are a multi-dimensional humanity. And I just said on my Skya show, which is played every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, that we are now we've reached the threshold on the planet where about 7%, per my professional estimation, 7% of the planet has realized that we actually are living in a multi-dimensional planet, which is a part of the electric multi-dimensional universe. So we are just a seed of many different pod plants, many different planets having life. And we've been seeded from the original source, which is probably a long way from here. And that's what I was shown by these cosmic energies. Now, Ethan, I got to tell you, I was in an angry disbelief state of everything that I've mentioned to you so far for many, many years. And only my closest friends, not most of my family, have known this fact that I'm sharing with you today. But I'm coming out today on your show and exploring this because of the name and the themes that you represent on your shows. And I thought that this would be a good time to indicate to a quote unquote general population that's awakening that it's now time. We are okay in expressing to each other that there is other cosmic life. This goes against what Carl Sagan said, that, we haven't found cosmic life. Cosmic other life forms have been on the planet for probably millions of years. We are just getting to that point now, though, where we're coming back and realizing that we have that awareness to see them and be with them. And by the way, I'd like to state on your channel that contrary to what Dr. Stephen Hawking says about that if cosmic energies or aliens comes to Earth, that they would annihilate us and attack us and we'd be doomed and trapped and put, in sort of an alien prison on planet Earth for the rest of time. this is completely false with all due respect to his thesis. I believe that as we become more of an intelligent life form that, these aliens have discovered in being able to, quote unquote, travel through dimensions, and understand medical technology of healing and so forth, like bioenergetic medicine, which we can also talk about today, they are at a higher frequency. And we know that joy and love is a much higher frequency than fear, which is unfortunately what a lot of leaders are functioning around the world at, and that's why there's a lot of war. So to put that into sort of a thesis, alien life, I believe, would not attack and ruin Earth or human inhabitants because they are vibrating at a higher frequency.
And were these extra-dimensional beings of a particular genetic or race, or do you even know that?
All I was told was the word Sulan, Sulan. And I have never been able to find anything. And, the joke is, right? Oh, okay, well, let's go and type in Sulan into Google or any other search engine. But why should we even consider that we're going to find something about it? Remember, most of these beings are not in an ego form that they have to announce themselves. See, and this is kind of the egotistical way of thinking about alien life, is that, one day we're going to get aliens or cosmic entities come to our planet and they're going to announce themselves in a spaceship that's going to hover over a city and say, "Hi, humanoids. We're here from, R2D2 planet or whatever, and we're here to help you get rid of all your radiation." It doesn't happen like that, because that's us thinking in ego form. They are working behind the scenes, so to speak, in those other higher dimensions. And literally, I believe they have done an incredible amount of work in literally stopping dictators and other negative forces on the planet from literally potentially annihilating us.
So you're saying contact essentially has already happened. A lot of people are waiting for, like you said, ships to hover over our cities and make a public announcement. But sounds like what you're saying is that's not really what we're looking for. Contact
No,
is already happening through a lot of us already, and even
exactly, and it's happening telepathically and also at words that we haven't even invented in other higher dimensions through other means. So, for example, telepathy would be through the brain, but one way of communication is above the brain. I know this sounds very weird, but one type of communication would be through the heart. The heart is really the connection to the one mind. And this is how life on Earth functions, through the heart, not through the mind. And so I don't know the word for it, but humanity is going into a heart-aligned divine intelligence contact. And the first step of that, probably about 9 steps, the first step would be to actually realize that we are all divinely connected energetically. And this is the reason why I called my book and the show Skya. Sky meaning everything above, the universe, the cosmos. Aya, A-I-A, comes from Gaia, meaning that obviously our planet is a living, breathing sphere of influence to live on. And when you connect those two, it essentially means that everything is electromagnetically connected at a higher awareness level. And I'd like to use that word again, that awareness. That is probably step number 2, that we are aware that we come from some other place that seeded us here on Earth.
Now, doesn't the human heart actually have more neurons in the brain? Isn't that, I think the Institute of Heart Math came out with some research on
Yes,
that, right?
the Institute of Heart Math has done an incredible amount of research, and I really take my hat off to them because they are some of the forerunners in this research, talking about the heart and what it represents to us at a health level. So, for example, when we go to the doctors, right, and we get a checkup, And doc, I have a headache, or doc, I have, something wrong with my arm. We often think that physical health is the most important, but it's less than 15% of our total health. There's actually 5 main areas of health. There's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and electromagnetic. And believe it or not, the electromagnetic and emotional forms of health are the most important. They comprise over 65% of health. So if you are emotionally unbalanced, if you are angry as a person, if you're fearful, you actually are lowering your electromagnetic sort of fence. It's like the alarm system, around a house or a building. When you drop that alarm system in your body, that electromagnetic aura, that sort of, they say in Uruguay, the campo de energía, it's like a field of energy around you, then your defenses, your immunity actually drops down too. And there's all kinds of products, for example, on the, in the supermarket. Like, for example, if you drink a Coca-Cola, it actually drops your electromagnetic aura for about 12 hours. And you're literally a sitting duck for any virus or bacteria to enter into you. So there's a lot of, things that we have to be very careful about in nutrition, because it actually affects our electromagnetic health much more.
So, was there a particular reason why these extra-dimensional beings were communicating with you? Were they teaching you something or preparing you for something? Was there a general theme of the interaction over the years?
Yes. I never realized it, of course, until in my early 20s when I was at Cornell University. There was actually, if I may state to you, there was actually a class where everything just clicked. And back in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was at Cornell University studying atmospheric physics and science, there was one professor that told me, Simon, in this oral presentation that you'll have on Friday, you cannot make a forecast more than 3 days in advance on the weather forecast. And I said, but professor, I said, we've got to cross new thresholds. And Simon, I don't want any of it. You just do the 3-day forecast and that is it. But Simon, let me make myself perfectly clear to you, okay? And it was almost like Sonny Jim. I mean, you could tell the threat in his eyes. This is kind of like professor-student relationship. Now, number one, I had learned not to have fear and to sort of stand up and push out my heart chakra, kind of like the bullfrog does in front of, a python. It actually can change the thinking of that snake not to eat the bullfrog. It's more than just physical. The bullfrog is actually extending out the heart chakra energy. But not in fear. It's like, oh, please, Mr. Snake, don't eat me. It's nothing like that. That's the ego. What it is it's extending out a huge energetic spectrum. And I did the same thing to the professor. And this is what the cosmic energies had taught me how to do in my life to achieve higher abundance. And so the professor said to me, Ethan, if you go out to your 10-day forecast, which you think you're so hot on, I will give you an F. And I said, so basically I have a choice of not to go further in science so that we can try to see what happens with the 10-day forecast. Maybe we can do a new theory in weather forecasting, and I've got to get the F for that. So I've got to suffer, or I've got to do your way and just do a 3-day forecast and maybe get an A or a B. He said, that's correct. I said, we'll just have to see what happens on Friday then. This is me talking at 20. And, it's almost like I'm getting, I can feel that very day in my heart right now. But it really made it for me, because you can imagine what I did. And I told all the students, what the professor had told me. And of course, you can imagine what the students said. Come on, Simon, go for it. Not them thinking that I'm going to get the F, right? But it's I won't hold you in suspense anymore. It's the most proud F at an Ivy League institution that I've ever received. And, not many times I recount that story, but it changed my life, because today, obviously, I'm the CEO of Advanced Forecasting Corporation, where we have global clients and we give them an edge in risk management. not just in climate, but also in macroeconomics. And we basically push the envelope out further. So the main message that these cosmic energies told me was, number one, never have fear, because not only does it drop your immunity and health, it also slows you down in life. You don't get the same abundance. A lot of negative energy is attracted to you because the universe is one giant mirror. Anything that you throw out in that sort of, cerebral energetics, you get back, 10, 100,000 fold. And it also showed me that we are each here for a purpose. And that is what we have to figure out. But I can tell you as a hint, your purpose is going to be directly related to the top three passions. Maybe not necessarily the top three, but the key passion that you have in life. That's where your key abundance is going to be. And look, this is nothing new, but it's just a reminder of how all energy works on the planet and in the universe.
I'd like to delve more deeply into your educational background. You mentioned Cornell. So what exactly is your educational background?
Yeah, so I basically got my Bachelor of Science at Cornell University. And, back in the late 80s, early 90s, graduated in 91. It was a real pressure cooker school. I mean, these were the days where, unfortunately, 5, 6, 7, 8 students a semester were jumping off of the bridge there on the gorge. And of course, everything's changed since then in the psychology of students and caring for them as more than just, testing them to the 9th degree. But then after that, I went straight to Japan and joined the largest weather risk company in the world called Weather News, and worked very closely with the president there, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago from cancer. And then I went up to Finland. I wanted to do an MBA, but believe it or not, in the early 90s, Ethan, look back into history, wasn't that too long ago, but America did not have a very competitive MBA program. And the one in Helsinki, Finland, was all from visiting professors from all over the world, whereby they would come in for 3 weeks and teach for 4 to 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 weeks. And that was the equivalent of, let's say, the American system, where it was 45 minutes or 50 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 12 weeks. And this kind of compressed system was so much more effective in learning. And it's actually one thing that I would like to put out to a lot of teachers out there, to try to get the American system. If we're going to be competitive in the future in America, we've got to change the educational system in compressing the modules of education, because psychologically this is a much faster way of learning. So I went there and I had people coming in from Harvard, the University of South Africa, University of Tel Aviv. There was one coming in from Brazil, all over the world. And I had about 30 classes over a year and a half. And the last semester was to finish up in Hawaii. So I went from, the frigid north to Hawaii, and then spent a few years there, and just, kept on traveling around. And I think it was in 2004 or late 2003 where I still had a lot of fibromyalgia. And this is not too common in young men. It's more a illness with young to middle-aged women, where literally your muscles seize up, you have headaches, it's very much related to chronic fatigue syndrome. And I was literally a walking disaster in health. And I kind of had a little, I get this occasionally, I get a little bit of clairvoyance. I think it's coming in from these cosmic entities, because they almost have like a chaperone relationship with each person for the rest of your life. That has been made aware for me. It's almost like they care for you. It's not quite the word, but it would be almost like they give you instruction on how to help humanity. Again, this is the reason why I think they are more intelligent in a sort of a heart or love vibrational way, in that they literally care about putting certain individuals, and there's millions of them. I mean, look, I'm just a pawn in the system, but there are millions of people that have these chaperone visitations. And a lot of them are in fear. Like a lot of people, when they're visited by these cosmic journeying entities, they rebel, They can't accept it. They go delirious. Some of them end up in mental asylums because they're seeing things, obviously, them, the beings, and they just can't take it. But I feel very lucky for that I actually accepted this into my heart. Again, accepting into your heart is all about forgiveness. And when somebody can forgive, their health actually goes up. It's all connected in a very interesting way. And I got very interested in natural medicine. I had always known that allopathic medicine with all types of big pharmaceutical pills, I just used to read the side effects and used to think, my God, if somebody's taking a pill, Ethan, for rosacea, the coloring, the red coloring of the skin, side effects was brain hemorrhaging. And there were people taking this drug just to get rid of the redness around their nose and cheeks and potentially suffering from brain hemorrhaging. I thought, wow, this can't be the case. Why would people take this risk? So I got into something called bioenergetic medicine. And before that, I was studying the energy fields of the planet. So the blue hue that is around Earth is actually an electromagnetic force that protects the planet from strong pulses of cosmic energy flow. And it's an incredible system. It's the same system that we have around our bodies. Some people can see them; they have different colors. But of course, most allopathic doctors will say, "Wow, Simon, you've been drinking too much," or "What have you been doing down there in Uruguay?" But we are making steps with many dozens of allopathic doctors, MDs. I take my hats off to them too, because they're coming out with books and explaining what we can do in the way of healing energetically. So I went and got a degree that I worked on for 6.5 years, a PhD from CCNH. Unfortunately, the school is no longer in business. They went bankrupt. It was headquartered in Alabama. And it was mainly a distant education school, although you could go down there if you wanted to. I was up in Montana at the time, so I didn't want to, create some kind of, problems with my family and moving them. So I did this distant PhD. Now, back in 2004, that was not seen as a cool thing. Like if you wanted a PhD, you had to go to, Harvard, or you had to go to some other school for naturopathy and things like this, but it was going to cost me to the tune of $500,000. And I quickly said, no, I don't want to do this. So I went a different path, one that wasn't cool at the time. And especially, when the school had been in business for 30 years and was the top natural medicine school in the US, and then it went bankrupt, people said, well, Simon, you haven't got any degree anymore. I said, well, we can debate that point, but degree or no degree, Ethan, it's what you have here. And this is what I want to get out to a lot of people today, that it's not about the piece of paper or the graduate degree that you have on the wall. It's about your sincere message and what you can get across to the world and how you can help yourself. Remember, it's all about self-love first. So after that, getting that in, I think, 2011, I went to India. And I was really smitten with the Indian system of health. It's so much further advanced than so many sectors of health in the US. And it really goes back to the old system of China. But, obviously we know yoga and other forms of meditation come from India and China, depending on the century. But the key is, Ethan, that school out there, IBAM, Indian Bureau of Alternative Medicines, the school had a very, very, what's the right word? It had a very relaxed way of studying. It was your passion, and you had to write a dissertation of 300 pages. And I did it basically on the way the Earth's electromagnetic energy can affect the individual auras of humans. And so perhaps this can get us into a different subject of how cosmic energy, solar energy, and earth energy itself, because that goes up and down, can actually affect our own health. And that's really what I studied.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I would like to talk about that in a minute. But more in general, what do you think about the flat Earth theory? Is that even viable theory, do you think?
It is. Here's what I've come to learn. And I straddle, for no political reasons, but I straddle both worlds. I have, as you know, I've done a lot of physics. I've done a lot of math. The Earth as a round sphere, as we've been shown by NASA, is a complete lie. I have gone through a lot of the different mathematical formulas of figuring out distance on the horizon, of why objects disappear besides the optical illusions. I've thought about the distance that planes go with the rotation of the Earth. Remember, if you want to go from New York to London, and we say, okay, it takes you 6 hours, but the world is going around at a certain rotation, we're always chasing. And what happens is when you do the math, things don't quite add up the way you think they are. However, so what has happened is we've become awakened to this all of a sudden, because we're starting to change the frequency in our brains due to the changes in the cosmic energies. And I've been talking a lot about wave X, which was the name that I brought to this intergalactic electromagnetic frequency that's coming into the planet at this time. And we're actually reaching peak on the 20th, or around about that, on the 20th of October 2015. And then we're going down. And that's when we really start a massive awakening on the planet. So what has happened is a lot of people have come out and said, wait a sec, this is not making sense. We think the planet has got to be flat. And then they show a little sphere like underneath. But I think that there's a lot of pieces on this also that don't make sense, particularly since we are in quote unquote space, and it would be very hard for that shape to actually rotate around a certain system, let's say whether it's the Milky Way or the sun. So it seems to be, Ethan, and this is what I'm proposing, and I'm going to be working on more in 2016, that the Earth is actually existing. Right, you ready for this? Because this is going to sound weird. The Earth is actually existing in multiple dimensions depending upon the vertical level that you are at. So when we are on Earth right now, it's 3D. But when we go up a certain height, the dimensional forces shift. This is why I truly believe that beyond a certain height, we cannot enter right now as a human form. We cannot enter. So, for example, we have not gone to the moon. I'm just going to put that out right now. It's more than just the radiation of why some people have said, well, you can't go to the moon because of the Van Allen belt of radiation. It is very strong, but perhaps we have the technology to get through that. Okay, I'm going to give that out right now. But what I am saying is that we probably have never been to the moon at a human level because of the ability, the inability to go through a multi-dimensional field and come back, without disappearing through a wormhole or something like that. And by the way, this is proven. NASA knows it. They hide it. It is also known by other major scientific agencies around the world that there are about 128 points on the Earth that are literally wormhole portals. And the ancient people on the planet, Ethan, knew this. The Egyptians did, the Sumerians. It goes back to, the hieroglyphics on the pyramids of them holding torches. These were energy devices that were powered up. The pyramids themselves had gold caps. Most of them are missing right now. because it literally, they literally were energy communication centers. And each one of these 128 points is actually put on the globe as a crystalline grid structure. It's kind of like in a octagonal honeybee structure. And when all of these points are activated, Earth can actually go in and out of different multidimensional states. So to sum it up for you, not to be so, talkative here, but it's an incredibly important subject. The Earth is not what we think it is, because it is existing in multidimensional states at different vertical levels.
So when you're speaking about vertical levels, you're talking about vertical levels in the physical atmosphere, right? So if you're
Yes.
flying higher in a plane, you're in a different dimensional level of the Earth. Is that what you mean?
This is correct. And so, for example, aircraft like Boeing or the government has told us, well, the elevation of most passenger jets is at, X altitude. Let's say it's 40, 45,000 feet. And what they say is we cannot go any higher because there's a lack of oxygen. Now, the technology exists to allow for more oxygen, okay? And we could go higher, but what starts happening is that the dimensional forces start shifting. And so, for example, there's been some private experiments where a man has jumped out from a rocket that has been obviously stationary, but I think it was at about 108,000. Let's see, what would it be? Would it be 108,000? Not miles or kilometers. Wait, I'm losing the actual metrics here. It would have to be above near the orbiting areas of satellites, but a bit lower than that. But anyway, you can find it on YouTube. Just type in man jumping from high altitude or something like that. I wish I had the actual height, and maybe it'll come back to me right now. But basically, he jumped out, and obviously he goes into a spin, but he's actually having a multi-dimensional experience that is really, really bizarre, because we don't think that this is possible. But this is the quote unquote the big lie that has been hidden from us for so many years.
So can you explain the mechanics of why, when we look into a telescope, do we see our planets as being round?
Yeah, well, what's happening is that we are looking through and into or through a multiple set of dimensions. And so essentially, when we look through that set of dimensions, we're seeing stars, we're seeing planets. But if you go to a certain height above the planet Earth, you don't see these stars. And this has come out in different photos. It has actually been on the declassified tapes of NASA that they didn't think that when they were being recorded in the 60s, 1969, when we supposedly went to the moon. There's many different connection spots where deep level research teams have gone into and said, wait a sec, this is not the same when we're down here on the Earth as to when we are out in space. Now, I do not know the answer why when we look through a telescope, they appear round. It has something to do with the ionics in the atmosphere of Earth, the way things bend. It's kind of like, why is a rainbow round? Or, for example, when we look through a water drop, light is refracted. So there's a lot of physics that goes on. And look, something that's yet to be really developed is multi-dimensional physics, so that we would get equations developed when we are looking through, great distances. And it's probably the reason why everything is round.
I see. So basically all of our science is based on our three-dimensional perspective, and that's going to have to change, obviously, in the future.
Yes, that's right. And I think this show may even start something very new, because I have not seen another video yet, and I'm not saying that this is special or anything like that, but it's something that I wanted to bring out today, and I thank you for having the open mind to allow me to do this, but to tell people that as we go up into the physical dimension of the Earth in the altitude, that the actual structure of the Earth shifts because we're changing dimensions. And it's very hard to kind of wrap your head around that. But this is why we are awakening and we're saying, no, the Earth's flat. No, the Earth's round. Well, it's actually a combination of everything.
So basically, well, from my understanding, and you can give me your opinion on this, but it sounds to me like as human beings, we're all existing in all dimensions at the same time, but each one of us has a certain dimensional awareness. So some of us are more conscious than others, and so there's a lot of talk going on, and I don't want to get too much into this area, but just to get your understanding of dimensions, about there being these two Earths where two Earths are diverging from each other, where one has a lower consciousness and one has a higher consciousness. And there are many different theories and philosophies on this. Some people use the word ascension, as there is a certain percentage of human beings who are ascending this higher dimensional Earth, and other people believe that everyone of a lower consciousness is just going to die off in wars and whatnot. So we're all existing in slightly different dimensional awarenesses. So just to go back to your explanation of the flat Earth, round Earth, different theories, and obviously in more ancient, well, not ancient times, but in our history, it was believed that the Earth was flat. So is it possible? So you're basically saying that at different times. So why would, I guess what I'm trying to understand here is, why would several hundred years, I don't remember exactly when it was that they believed the Earth was flat, but obviously our consciousness, I would think, has evolved further by now. So, and how is it that the people at earlier times believed the Earth was flat, and we've since now believed the Earth is more people believe it's round, and now we're going back to flat?
Well, don't forget that since those earlier days, technology and the form of education on the planet has brainwashed the majority of people into believing certain things. It would be very, very difficult to tell somebody that the sky is not blue. Now, look, I'm not necessarily debating that, but for example, if I was living full time in 7 dimensions on Earth, I'm saying that there's a possibility that the sky is not blue. And so it goes back to the point where, let's say in the 1600s or the 1500s, when they thought the planet was flat, that was their consciousness at that time. And by the way, Ethan, this is how evolution occurs. Evolution is purely electromagnetic, and then it shifts the DNA. All this stuff about, we came from, fish came to reptiles, and reptiles came to mammals, and mammals came to apes, and, or ape as a mammal came to humans, is complete hogwash. And about every 3,600, every 3,800 years, this quote unquote intergalactic cosmic wave from the center of the universe hits Earth. Again, this is to the limited amount of science that we have. It may be right, it may be wrong, but I can tell you with high confidence that there are certain cosmic energy waves that come through, bathe Earth, and push us further behind or further ahead of the ball, so to speak, in waves of consciousness. And that is constantly shifting. And it's really an optimistic thought now, but I have started broadcasting this, that literally going forward now, as more and more of the planet rises on this love, heart-aligned chakra vibration, we are actually going to have less war in the planet going forward. And now it's going to be sort of the awareness principle of people coming out, not in fear anymore, and talking out about new dimensions, new technologies in science and in medicine, so that we can actually progress forward in many different ways. But going back to, the Copernicus days, and all the Columbus things about, how he founded, the West Indies in 1492, all these stories have been completely modified for this common core knowledge that is half fakery, half propaganda.
It's basically all levels of understanding and awareness are not inaccurate. It's just people tuning into different levels of dimensions. So
Exactly. And look, if you count the number of words that we've said dimension in the last hour, it's probably been over 40. And I'm sure somebody will check it now. But that is the central theme, that the humanity as a whole, I always put humanity wins as my hashtag on Twitter. But I always say humanity is winning because we are now going to that awareness level where we are realizing we're multidimensional beings. And so one success, quote unquote success, or field of abundance, I call it the joy field, is going to be completely parallel to the cerebral energetics, the mind thoughts in a wave form of manipulating those. Maybe manipulating is a negative word, but controlling and commanding certain energy into your life to bring you and humanity more abundance. And that's where this is coming. Imagine that, known by over 1 million people. We can literally shift this planet forward in a very positive way.
you mentioned earlier that you are in your business, you serve as an advisor to professionals around the world. Can you delve a little into what exactly is the nature of the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's in global planetary threat management. And what that means is there are different risks and threats, hazards, perils in the world on a macroeconomic and at a natural basis. So this includes earth shift events, climatic disasters, macroeconomic black swans. So, for example, in the next 18 months, I am forecasting literally a global financial meltdown. That does not necessarily incorporate in that next 18 months a collapse in the dollar. Often the things that we hear most are literally not the things that are happening. But I can tell you that the top 12 economies in the world are collapsing at a very rapid rate right now. But again, it goes back to the principle we should not be necessarily in fear. What it's doing, Ethan, is it's shifting us to become more able to take care of ourselves rather than relying on a government or a corporate entity for our abundance. This is why I always tell people, write down your SWOT, your strengths, your weaknesses, your threats, and your opportunities. And most people don't really know themselves very well. And when you come to do this little exercise of putting down your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you're actually getting to know yourself a lot better, and thereby following your passion, watching out for certain threats, and then incorporating that into your life and literally getting your own abundance much more easily. But most of our clients are at the hedge fund or institutional level. They're banking institutions, and we literally give them an edge. A lot of people say, Simon, you're very green thinking, meaning not necessarily ecological, but very out there. And there was a time about 10 years ago, our firm is 22 years old, but there was about a time about 10, 12 years ago where people used to say, and now they just say, oh, I know that there's been a very nice shift. And I don't say this in ego. We've got a very, very traumatizing world events, from earthquakes to even tsunamis, major economic plots. And the very interesting thing, Ethan, that we found is that major geopolitical events and major market crashes actually follow different energies from the sun. So, for example, solar flares always provide a very distressful, chaotic energy on Earth. And there are usually very high level geopolitical events after a rapid number of solar flares. And it almost has an 82 to 85% correlation between that energy that leaves the sun in an ionic form, in a plasma form, and it changes the energy at the magnetosphere, which is the top layer of the planet. So it slams in the energy from the sun, slams into the magnetosphere, and it's called magnetosphere for a reason, because it changes the magnetic flux on the planet, and it ripples down, and it can, for example, hit the jet stream and cause major storms to occur. But it also affects the brain and the heart, because they are both electromagnetic parts of our body. The heart, we all know about the electric heart being, how do we get it tested? The electrocardiogram. And we know in the brain, there's synapses, right, where the energy or the lightning jumps from one synapse to another. And this is all this is what we have to know and tell people. I'm just going all over because I've got so many thoughts in my mind, but like dementia or Alzheimer's is literally a malfunctioning of the electromagnetic energy in the brain. And you can correct that by using, an advanced thinking, if you will, on changing that electromagnetic sequencing. So, for example, there's bioenergetic devices out there like PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic flux machines, or just RIFE, RIFE, that can literally help an individual suffering in dementia or Alzheimer's, and literally correct that synaptic gap and improve the person's health and literally rid the disease. But the FDA, of course, doesn't want people knowing about this, because then it eats into the big pharmaceutical drug profits.
Right. So explain to me, now I used to be a professional trader some years ago, and used to run an international organization with traders a lot of whom worked for the major brokerage houses and so on. So I'm familiar with that understanding. And what I'd like to know more about is how more of the mechanics of what you see happening when there are major market ups and downs, and maybe give some examples. For example, we had some downturn in the market in recent months. So what exactly is taking place there?
Right. So unfortunately, as the technology gets more and more complex, there are certain nations around the world that I've seen in my research that actually manipulate the markets. So, for example, in the 50s, the 60s, and maybe the 70s, the markets, the stock markets, the stock exchanges, equity markets, were actually functioning more or less on their own. So when there was bad news, the markets would go down. When there was great news, a reason to be really happy, let's say, unemployment went down, the markets would go up 95% of the time or higher. Unfortunately, today, most stock markets, especially the US and the European markets, are very much a big Ponzi scheme. That's because they're manipulated to the greater wealth of, like people like the Committee of 300, which is the ruling, quote unquote, families and groups on the planet that make most major decisions. And it goes into incredible tunnels. I'm sure you've done some of this research yourself, Ethan, but it makes our world look like an Alice in Wonderland tunnel when you start doing these major connection points. I would never, ever have anything of my wealth, quote unquote, in the stock market today. A lot's changed, and people just don't know this. And there's all kinds of executive orders now being made on taking pension schemes out of the market to protect the welfare of the US. And a lot of people don't even know this. So, a big part of my being on the planet right now is to give people empowerment, to literally give them this edge, to tell them, look, don't take it from me. Research and do empowerment yourself, and learn about what's really happening in the world. But I think going into 2016, the irony is that people will be learning how to self-create, become more aware, and they will become more disjointed from the corporate elite and the media that is literally increasing the propaganda bandwagon.
Well, I've spoken with recently somebody who is a financial insider who spoke a lot about what's coming in the near future, and he did mention that he put a 7-year timetable as the likely time period it could happen, but that there is a new currency being developed in the United States, and
Yes.
he said within the next 12 months that's taking place. Whether or not they'll introduce it right away, he didn't know for sure, but that there was a major overhaul happening in the financial system, and
Yep.
that in the next 7 years we wouldn't have Federal Reserve and IRS and these kind of things in the U.S. So,
yep. Yep. We're
so
going
you're
through
seeing correlation to that.
Yes, we're going through huge shifts. I would say that it's going to be a lot longer than 12 months. It's such a huge change there. The sort of the elite. This is, again, look up the word Committee of 300. They are the decision makers. It's like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Farnese family, the royal family. The presidents are just literally, quote unquote, most of them are just puppets serving the interests of the higher ups. And so the plan has been going for many, many years, and will probably take another 3. My professional prediction, this is what I've been telling clients, and it's okay. Some of them have given me permission to say this on air even today, is that the dollar is probably going to drop in late 2017 or early 2018. And the currency that will be taking over worldwide is a digital currency. There will be countries obviously behind the times, and they will continue their own paper currency because they won't have the money to keep up with this sort of digitized currency. But if you only have to go to Europe to see how societies have really advanced into this. I would say Sweden is probably at the top of this digital currency. Even Finland is. And what's happening is that the government knows every single transaction between individuals and amongst themselves, and it's all tracked. And so literally the main theme going into the next few years is about the control. And the people that are becoming more and more aware are finding out loopholes and ways to get out of that control, but realize that the control is becoming much sort of, there's less holes in it. It's like kind of like Swiss cheese over the last 20 years, a lot of loopholes, people get through, tax havens in the Caribbean, in the Seychelles, that's all ending. So people are having to get their wealth into more areas. And probably a lot of people know a lot about places like the Dollar Vigilante. It's a sort of consulting firm, and they have not paid me to say anything about them, but I do follow them, and they've got a lot of good advice on what's really happening around the world. But it's going to be a digital currency, and a lot of people are already accepting different RFID chips in their fingers or thumbs. This has already happened in Hong Kong and in places in Scandinavia, where they just literally swipe their thumb, and you can store in medical records and everything. So that's the way it's going. But a lot of people, Ethan, will say that's the kind of the mark of the beast. And I think taking the religious text out of it is that I am a big believer that every human being is a sovereign entity that should never, ever be controlled. So I, for one, will not be doing that for the rest of my life. And I will be teaching my children never to go along with that.
So you actually see people willingly going through this process, because I don't, obviously those of us who are of this mindset, I don't foresee wanting to be chipped anytime soon.
No, you'd be surprised how many people line up for certain things. So, for example, take the iPad, the new one that may come out soon, or take just the iPhone 6 or 7 or 8. There are thousands upon thousands of people that line outside just to get the first one. They'll line out in 38 degree Fahrenheit, 3 Celsius in heavy rain for 2 days. Catch the flu just to get that. There's been many different examples of in major cities in the US, and they've tried this before, that come and get 3 liters of Pepsi for free, and thousands of people have shown up. It's absolutely incredible what people will do. In California, they tried bring in your guns now before laws shift. And, they full well know that they don't have a law on the books, but it's kind of a indirect threat to try to get guns off the citizens, which I am completely against also. But people will turn in their guns and get $25, $50. And the police will say, well, we guarantee that, you're not going to get into trouble. This is actually happening. So it's amazing what people will do. Because they're just so far into the propaganda and the brainwashing. And this is, of course, really advanced by the frequency of the televisions these days. The technology that's put into these plasma TVs actually affects people's brain waves to go into this sort of semi morphed state where they're literally just flickering, at a 20% of reality.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially right now in the United States with the Common Core education program and mandatory vaccines for schools. A lot of parents are actually just going along with all of that without really much objection. Although there is also an increasing number of people who are pulling their kids out of school as well.
Yes, it's at record highs. And I'm very much for parents doing that. A lot of parents will say, God, start freaking out. And, I get 300 emails a day, and some parents say, well, what am I supposed to do if I don't want to get vaccines, but I want to stay near my family in California? Well, essentially, you've got to get a MD certified medical waiver, which you can still get, and you can even get an MD out of California to sign it for you. There's many out there that are even coming forward in public news and saying, I'm an MD, I am against vaccines, and this is this reduction in fear, where doctors are actually saying, I'm ready to sign these medical waivers. And so it's really, really big of when people can really understand and empower themselves that vaccines have got many, many toxic ingredients. They grow most of the live vaccines, Ethan, on aborted baboon fetuses. And the CDC actually admits this on their website today.
Now, you mentioned WaveX, and I know that's a lot of what you speak on in different shows. What evidence do you have that and I know Dr. Paul Laviolette speaks a lot about the same thing, but in different terminology. What evidence do you have that an actual WaveX is happening?
Well, it's a great question. And in anything in science, there's usually not 100% confirmation. What we do is we put different connecting spots, I call it connective logic, together, and we come up with a theory or a proposal or a hypothesis, and then we make it tighter with more learning and more research that we do. So, for example, if you type into any search engine, gamma ray, R-A-Y, burst, you'll find that NASA has admitted that there has been very recently, in the last 18 months, a huge gamma ray burst from the center of the galaxy. We'll also put together a lot of research from different universities and agencies around the world that cosmic rays often bombard Earth and actually change climate. So, for example, true long-range shifts in the Earth's climate has actually been caused not by carbon dioxide and global warming, which is a complete farce. It's actually being caused by changes in the solar output, both magnetic and light form and heat form. And it's also been changed by cosmic energy flow. And so what we've done is we've put a lot of these different research proposals and confirmations together. And we said, okay, what's truly going on? And at an atmospheric level, I've also noticed that it takes about 4 to 5 times, Ethan, the time now to make a long-range forecast like we do for our clients than it did 10 years ago. So, in 2005, I would spend 1 hour on a long-range forecast. Now I'm spending 4 to 5 hours because the complexity of the wavelengths of the frequency, the Schumann resonance of the Earth's atmosphere is shifting so rapidly. And this is why, at, let's say, a common core level, not to use those words, but at a general level, people think, my God, hasn't the world become more chaos? Hasn't it become much more complex in the last 10 years? And the easy answer is yes. I think most of us would have to agree with that, unless we live in a cave, and we just don't look out the hole every day. But it's become so much more complex in the last 10 years. And so we put all this together, and I used to call it the frequency shift. So it goes back to the scientific hypothesis of the Schumann resonance, which has actually been proven since, I think his name, I forget his first name, but his last name is obviously Schumann. He calculated that the Earth pulses at a certain frequency. And that has actually been going up and down very rapidly in the last 9 months. And so I thought, okay, well, what's a easy way to call this frequency shift? And I remember, obviously, there's a lot of information out there about Planet X. Well, NASA was the first one to call it Planet X in 1983 in a New York Times bit where they found something out there. They didn't know what it was. And, it's online. You just type in Planet X 1983 New York Times article, and you see the piece right there. And they call it Planet X, but it's not a planet. It's an actual wave of energy. Again, gamma rays, cosmic rays, neutrons, stars are exploding and contracting. So there's different sort of pulses through the electric universe. And this is actually coming towards Earth. And, you put 2 and 2 together, and it's literally been the last 3 months, and wave X is actually peaking right now.
So what effect do gamma rays and the other cosmic radiation that you're talking about have on human behavior, psychology, emotional states? The reason I ask is you mentioned 18 months that there's been this gamma ray burst going on. And in particular, because our show reaches a lot of people internationally, and we do a lot of other work too through our expo and a variety of other things. And so we get this flood of communication from people all over who've been going through intense emotional upheaval over the course of this past year, and also a lot of relationships breaking up, and just serious health illnesses and a variety of things. And so I'm wondering, from your experience and your expertise, and of course you've got some, because of the education you had into the bioenergetics and so on, what effect does this gamma radiation have on human beings?
Well, it's an excellent question, Ethan, and one that I think we ought to consider much more going forward, because it literally is shifting our DNA. And for a lot of people that are going into this fear state, the longevity rates are going down. And a lot of people don't know this. They think that, for example, let's take the American longevity rate in society. Men is at like 77, 78. Women, they say, is 80, 81. And this is absolutely, completely false. We have gone down in the last 10 years from about the same number. It was a couple of years lower. But now we're sitting sort of in the low 70s with men and the mid 70s for women. And if you think about it, a lot of people have started noticing this already, that a lot of people are dying in their 40s and 50s. And, it's just come out that there's a 41% chance in your lifetime in living in America that you're going to have cancer. That's almost 1 in 2. And so, you think millions and millions of dollars are being spent on cancer prevention. But the fact is, and it's a startling fact about the control of big pharmaceutical technology, and also the US government being in bed, through the FDA, that they do not want anybody coming out, and they've actually made it against the law in certain countries, including in parts of the US, that you cannot say that there's a cancer cure, but there is. And there's a lot of medical doctors now fighting this, and there's, for example, if you check out thetruthforcancer.com, that there's many doctors, MDs coming out and saying there are now cures. So a lot of what's happening on the planet right now is based upon somebody's vibration. All right, whether you're in the fear mode, just kind of survival mode, like the Maslow, okay, I got a roof over my head, I've got food until Thursday in the fridge. They're thinking about this constantly, and their adrenaline is just literally pumping through. God, I hope I'm going to be able to pray. I hope I'm going to be able to feed my family next month. That's a fear vibration, and it brings down your immunity terribly. They get sick often, and actually will die, unfortunately, at a much earlier age than average. But through the awareness and through meditation and yoga and qigong and other advanced exercises for the human body, mind, and heart, people can raise their vibration to the joy field and actually live a much different reality and live a lot longer. So the gamma rays is actually shifting our DNA and literally separating people into many different camps. It's kind of like the visible spectrum. Many people are going up, so to speak, up, and it's not necessarily better, but that's their karma, that's their will. It's also a little bit of luck of where you are at a certain time and space. And a lot of people are unfortunately going down. They just cannot survive. And this is why suicides have been going through the roof in many different countries.
So when you say a genetic change, are we talking about, and of course we're going to get a little esoteric here, but
Yeah.
Are you speaking about a multidimensional genetic change, or do you foresee us actually being able to physically measure a change in DNA?
No, it would have to be at the multi-dimensional level. Remember that we are connected to source. So, for example, if a person does not have any REM, a rapid eye movement in dream state, for more than 3 to 4 days, 5 days max, you will actually die. And so the connection to that source point, and I'm not talking about anything religious here, going back to God or source or universe or one. You can call it what you want, but this is what makes all humans the same, is that we have to connect in order to recharge. And I find it just fascinating at a medical level or scientific level that nobody can come out to me right now. And maybe, as I say, I don't have all the answers. I'm just putting things together, Ethan. But I wish there would be somebody or a group that would say, okay, each day that we are very, very tired, we go to bed, we wake up the next day feeling refreshed. What happened? And I would like a solid answer. And this is my small little addition to humanity. We connect into a multi-dimensional state. We are actually time traveling through that dream state. We are continuing reality. It's just a different set of dimensions. So we're not actually dreaming. This is where it's been misnamed. We are still in full functioning mode. It's just that we have that acceptance to go down into that next wormhole, that tunnel. Now, people that have insomnia are actually vibrating at a lower frequency and are not able to be accepted into that wormhole, so they cannot get into an REM state very easily. The higher you move your vibration, the less the insomnia have, the more rapid eye movement dream state, quote unquote, you have, and the more abundance you have. This is why it's so important to make this distinction so that you can achieve abundance here on Earth. A lot of people say, well, Sonny Jim, you wait till, Jesus comes or Buddha or what have you, and, you can have heaven, when you die. And my point here today is there already is this heaven on Earth. It's just that you have to change your vibration. And of course, it's easier said than done. I mean, it's no big secret, but it's not as easy as buttering your toast in the morning. You've literally got to change all of this. And that's why I go back to that cerebral energetics. Everything revolves around that because that commands your flow.
So are you saying it's just a matter of sleeping more? I mean, obviously not in every case, but is just sleeping more at night or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I have always said from the get-go, sorry to interrupt you there, but I have said as wave X comes in and intensifies, the only way that you can get through this in a better state of mind is to sleep more and to raise your vibration. And by sleeping more, you can literally raise your vibration so that you're always above the wave. So if the wave is coming in here and you are down here, you're being smothered. But if the wave's coming in here and you literally move your vibration higher, you're functioning at a reality where the wave X moving through the planet is not affecting you as much, and you will be much higher likely to, quote unquote, survive. I know a lot of people that are vibrating down here, and something that I'm having a big challenge in right now, because I'm not an expert in doing it, and I'm helping these people and sending them on. But through those emails, Ethan, and because I'm doing this Skya show that is with gratitude really getting out there now in its second year, there's a lot of people emailing me that they're feeling suicidal. And my best advice is to sleep more so that you can literally more easily raise your vibration and get above this frequency that is literally attacking us.
Obviously, there are some people who are already highly conscious who don't need to do that, right? Because I know some spiritual masters who hardly sleep at all, and yet they're not being pulled down by any of this. So basically, you're saying, if I understand correctly, that we need to raise our vibration. If we already have other means of doing that, let's say we meditate a lot, then maybe more sleep isn't necessary. But for the mainstream, sleep is one way to more easily to raise that vibration.
Yes, and those masters, remember, in a quote-unquote 24-hour day here on planet Earth, they are vibing or vibrating at a higher dimension when they are awake. So in other words, usually the human standard, if you will, is that we only go into that higher set of dimensions when we quote unquote sleep. But these masters are able to do this 18, 20, 22 hours a day and only sleep another 2 or 3 or 4 hours. That's because for another 4 or 5 hours in that 24-hour period, they're actually vibing at that 7th dimensional state, but walking around, not sleeping.
What other effects are, so we have cosmic radiation, gamma radiation, and so on, which is also coming from our sun as well, right? So
yes.
What other kind of effects are we having or are we seeing on a planetary scale or even with human beings that this radiation is having on us at this time? And has this only been going on for 18 months or has this been building in concentration up to this point? When was it more normal, or I don't want to use the word normal, but when was it substantially less?
Yeah, no, these waves have been coming in over and over and over, but the one in the last 18 months has been much, much stronger. So, for example, there was one literally about 16 years ago, right at the turn of the century. There was one in late 2011 that concurred with the quote-unquote 2012 event. But this one is so much stronger. I would have to say that in trying to measure the difference, this one is easily over 100 times as strong. And that's why literally more people have noticed the much bigger increase in the chaotic number of events, because as the gamma rays come in, they affect the weather systems, they affect the immunity of the planet. Remember, that blue glow that we talked about over the Earth is literally being pushed down quite a bit during this wave X. And unfortunately, there are things that are taking quite a sacrificial kind of purpose. A lot of species have been eradicated in the last number of years, and that we've seen increase specifically in the last couple of years even. Whales dying in huge numbers. Now, obviously, some of that is in the Pacific due to the Fukushima radiation, which unfortunately is a grand event on the planet that, again, is buried under the carpet by mainstream media because they don't want people to panic, obviously. But, on that issue, what's coming out in non-fear mode, Ethan, is a type of technology that can literally neutralize radiation. It's called a torsion field generator. But the governments hide that fact because they do not want people becoming more well, because that allows them not to have the same control over people. Remember, that was one of the main themes. You've got humanity becoming more empowered, but you've also got governments and the ruling entities wanting to have more control over humanity so that they can track them, bill them, tax them, and things like that. Because as I said, in the next 18 months, as the global economies begin to fail more and more and more, there is going to be less money to those governments. So they've got to think of more ways to tax people. And this is why that whole big carbon taxation scheme has come out. That is all about global warming. It's about monitoring your carbon taxation. And I have, like you say, you speak to certain individuals that have the inroads. And I have a very close associate. I can't say the name, but she used to work at the IRS. And she said in the beginning of 2017 in the US, there will be a carbon taxation system that will tax every American. And it will be really pushed out very rapidly after the next presidential election, which is in late 2016, as you know. And for a family that goes above what the IRS and the US government set as your average family carbon amount, you will be having to pay at carbon tax. But it's completely false. The carbon dioxide does not affect the temperature on the planet. Other things do, like solar energy and volcanic eruptions. And like I said, the cosmic energies. So again, there's been this propaganda, but it's all to put people in the dark. But humanity is rising up above this. We're getting more light in our hearts, in our minds. And that's going to be the conflict, really, going forward over the next few years, is the amount of humans going into certain groups to enlighten the planet is going to go up rapidly. But so is the government enforcing.
So you see this, if I remember correctly, so you're seeing this wave X or this gamma radiation burst being the most intense in what time period? The next 18 months? Or when and what evidence do you have that it's only going to last that long?
No, actually, we're very much more fortunate than that. The peak has been October 2015 now, and we're going to see a sudden decrease in this through December and January, and that will allow humanity to really grow, sort of like how we did in the Renaissance period. Remember, the Renaissance period, Ethan, is a fascinating period in history where we really grew. And people say, well, wait a sec, how come we came from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance and we were just in this very creative state in architecture, in art, in music, and in realizing different things? Not only had the climate shifted to warmer, they were growing grapes in Scotland, but the electromagnetic energy on the planet, and this is the key that isn't mentioned in most scientific journals, the electromagnetic energy on the planet had shifted much higher to become homeostatic. There was a homeostasis with the human DNA that allowed us a less chaotic atmosphere. And that period is soon coming, probably starting sometime in 2016, but eventually really escalating to a more nurturing level in years to come. And that's why I'm saying that the amount of war will likely come down in years to come. But unfortunately, the people that control, and the entities, that's right, entities too on the planet that control the human population, they're going to get quite peed off because they want more control. And there will be more, quote unquote, false flag attempts to try to put humanity more in fear mode.
So you don't see any sort of that subsiding in the years ahead, where the individuals who are in power, as we raise in consciousness, are going to become less influential in our reality?
No, they're in fact, ironically, going to become more influential for a greater number of people. So, for example, let's say this is humanity. And let's say that right now we have about 70 to 80% of people, unfortunately, for lack of better a word, brainwashed and believing propaganda. They'll turn on CNN and they'll believe it as news and not theater. And it's been proven in many, many articles. Just go to naturalnews.com, go to zerohedge.com. They're actually proving that CNN is faking stories and making it up. It's just like the presidential elections, right? Cooper Anderson knew that Bernie Sanders was going to talk about his points about Hillary Clinton's emails before it actually came on TV. This is just being revealed. So it's all basically theater. And you get more people going into that area and more people controlled. But here's the saving grace, so to speak. The other 20 to 30% are actually going to become more empowered and have a greater ability to change the course of events on the planet. And that's the optimistic future that we will have in the next few years.
Are you seeing that a lot of these false flag events and so on are correlating with major solar activity? And if so, do you think that that's intentional, or do you think it just happens to be that way because the solar activity just brings about those types of stressful experiences?
Great question, Ethan. And what they do is, look, I'm on a small, let's say $2 million budget. But when you're at a multi-billion black ops project like DARPA and like the US government or the Israeli government or the British government, all right, M5, they have billions of dollars at their disposal to do all this space research. In fact, the UK government right now has put out a document saying that the space threat is the largest threat to the UK economy, bar none. And so when you start digging down, well, what does that really mean? Well, it means that as the solar energies are more intense going forward over the next few years, they are talking about a higher probability that their economy will collapse due to the fact that the grid, the power grid, could go down. And this actually remains, and the US government has not admitted this, only the UK government in the public realm, the largest risk going forward to society today is that the grid or parts of the power grid could fail. And most of the transformers that would fail with a large pulse of solar energy into the planet are actually made in India and China and Southeast Asia. And the delay would be 11 to 15 months to get those transformers back working in the US. And this is what a lot of people do not know. The people that do know are preparing for this in the fact that that black swan risk event could happen. And this is the type of advice that we give. We're not doomsday forecasters. We're not putting people in fear, but it is a fact that, for example, in years past, all the way back to the Carrington event, and also the event that put from Montreal down to near New York City in the black for more than 12 hours. You'll remember that event. What was that, about 20 years ago? Those events do repeat themselves. And what I'm saying right now is that the solar energies are pulsating at a stronger level because of the cosmic and gamma rays. And there probably will be some event that will affect a major population of the US for about, any number of weeks to any number of months in the US in the next 5 to 10 years.
And so in the next 5 to 10 years, you're seeing this period of time. What happens after that? I mean, I guess my question essentially is, based on what you were saying earlier, the people in power are going to stay in power. Do you see us heading toward a more positive future, or do you think that there's still a period of struggle ahead that's going to last a while before any sort of transition to, because a lot of people, and even in ancient prophecies, are speaking about this time as being the beginning of an age of enlightenment, or
Yep.
golden age, or heaven on earth, or whatever, lots of different terminology.
Right.
When do you see that happening? Do you see that happening?
No, I'm very optimistic now that now that we've gotten over this wave X. Look, if you rewind the time a year ago when I used to go on to public interviews, what I was very concerned about, and I said, quote unquote, on air, there was about an 85 to 90% chance or probability that humanity would make it through this wave X without any major events. There would be a 10 to 15% chance that the Black Ops project of CERN, CERN in Europe, would actually throw out a pulse to stop this wave X from coming. Now, remember, wave X, electromagnetic energy from the center of the galaxy, is a good form of energy because it's evolving the consciousness on the planet. The whole purpose of CERN was to block that. And so if it had blocked wave X, we would not be waking up. Fortunately, CERN went down. Their experiments failed. There has not been much in the news except for news of a few breakdowns. But CERN is pretty much gone and done. And that's why I say humanity wins. It's a different type of fight. And they call it down here luchar. And it really means that as we rise up in our hearts and more people, Ethan, take over, instead of thinking through mind, they think in heart, compassion rather than jealousy. They think in centeredness, not for themselves, but for humanity, rather than me. There's more of those people on the planet right now waking up in that method. So we are able to take more of the reins away from the control centers of the planet. So I'm very optimistic going forward. Now, will there still be chaos? Yes, of course. There will still be disasters. There'll be false flag attempts. But on an incremental level, over the next 10 years, we will be much further ahead in principles of good living, sustainable living, ecological living. A lot more people are going off the grid. And I always tell people, Ethan, if you have, let's just put out an amount, $25,000, which a number of people do have, you are much, much better never to put that money in control systems like pension schemes, IRAs, stock markets. Get water, land, and become off the grid. And that is your best investment yet, bar none.
So I know what we're told in the mainstream, that CERN is a particle accelerator, and they were searching for the Higgs boson particle or God particle, whatever.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your perception of what CERN was intended for is different. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah.
And what gave you that understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, it's connective logic. It goes back to the days where Rumsfeld, Department of Defense said that, we can't track $2 trillion. That's right, with a T, $2 trillion. He's very famous for coming out and saying that. Well, all governments that are in control in the world, mainly Israel, UK, France, and the US, not so necessarily much China. They have had always sort of a backseat row, but are coming more and more influential in the world now as the US economy is really at the skid marks. I mean, that information is all buried. But all of that money literally flowed out to central banks in Europe, and then it was buried into the Black Ops project called CERN. And it's obviously the Large Hadron Collider. And what they were saying is that they would collide the particles like neutrons and quarks and trying to find, like you said, the God particle. But what they were not telling people is that the collision, the collider part, was sending out a huge wave of electromagnetic energy, enough so that it would stop the wave X coming in. But we know that the galaxy, the universe, is contained mathematically. It is derived and directed through divine intelligence at a mathematical level. And it was so much ego to think that their multi-trillion-dollar black ops project called CERN could literally destroy this wave. It did not. And because we are now at that peak where humanity is rising up in consciousness and we made it, I'm very pleased to say, with a big smile, we can now move forward with less of a threat because we literally have gone up into that next evolutionary state. And that multidimensionality that we were talking about earlier in the program, it's going to become so much more visible to so many more people. And once this does, then we're going to have open source medicine, open source technology. Electricity will be free for many. I mean, take the South African Ubuntu Party, which is run by a guy called Michael Tellinger. He's just a quote unquote average South African citizen, but he's running for president on the platform of free energy for all. Well, if you look up what's going on in South Africa, there is some of those 128-point energy lines down there, and you can literally create electricity using this Tesla form of energy. And that's how we're going to move this planet forward, because more and more individuals are going to come out in not fear thinking, so they won't be picked up by the radar of those that are wanting us to be in fear.
I read an article that you sent me about quantum code and how it underlies the stock market. Can you explain what is quantum code and what are the implications on not only the stock market, but on human life in general?
Yeah, now this is a big one. So it's essentially what I was saying before early in the program was that most stock markets are literally, for lack of a better word, some kind of Ponzi scheme. Now, it goes way even above that at the quantum level. And what it is it's literally beyond the particle form. It is at the multidimensional level being potentially controlled by other forces. And I must admit that I do not understand everything in that paper. It was written by a very, very savvy state finance minister of, I believe, Romania. And the paper, of course, has not been distributed into the Western media at all. In fact, finding this paper, you'd have to type in stock market, quantum mechanics, and figure out, how to get it. But as I say, perhaps you can make it available, on one of your sites, that PDF. What it says, Ethan, is that there are forces behind mass consciousness decision making. And these forces actually are shifting the mass consciousness in one direction or the other. And it gets very interesting as to say, it's not necessarily who is controlling this, but it is what is controlling this. And I believe that because the Earth is traveling into something, what we call a wormhole at this time, and I think Dr. Stephen Hawking gives enough evidence of this, but doesn't come out and quite say that, yes, the Earth is traveling through a wormhole right now. That wormhole is transferring us from a 3-dimensional space to a 5, 6, or 7-dimensional space. And this is why it goes back to the point of what we talked about earlier, that many people are literally not making it. Remember, my prediction on air was always that 10 to 17% of a population is literally going to go literally mentally insane to the point where they'll either commit suicide or they'll end up in a mental asylum. This is why, you can ask any doctor out there what's happening to people at a psychological level. Most doctors in different psychological institutes have been telling me via email, and they've asked me, please, in confidentiality, not to use their name, but they've been telling me that many people have been getting all kinds of symptoms of going delirious or crazy. And a lot of these numbers are being blocked by state health departments, because if you look at the real numbers, like China's revealing, many people, even in middle and older age, are just literally committing suicide. And that's one of the unfortunate parts of humanity going through this shift right now. But going back and just summarizing to the quantum code level, is that once we better understand the multidimensionality of space, then we can apply it back to our own abundance and how to better control our lives. Because I think what most people think, Ethan, is that they're just floating through space. All these bad things are happening to them. They can't pay their bills. They get sick. They feel constantly downtrodden in life. But when we flip around and we understand that there is a quantum code in life that we can tap into through cerebral energetics, that is, again, watching what we command through our mental flow, then we can turn around life and start saying, yeah, I want that event to happen. Yeah, I want that amount of money. And people are literally proving at the quantum level that you can actually shift the energetics in your own space.
So how does this quantum code influence a holographic universe? And you were saying about that we can use this code to create our reality. Can you give an actual down-to-earth example of how someone could actually do that?
Yeah, so essentially it's allowing us all as sentient beings to become telepathic. And this is the next growth space in our hearts. And remember, I know this sounds confusing, but most people assimilate or associate telepathy with the mind. But it is first needed, and I'm going to do a show on this in the future too, just on telepathy, but you first have to raise the vibration from your heart to allow your mind to connect with the universe at a multidimensional level, to allow the telemetric symmetry to commence. So let me say that again. Raising the vibration to become heart aligned and in the joy field and in the love vibration of 432 or 528 hertz. Then it activates a portal in the cerebral energetics to connect into the subatomic level, the quantum mechanic, the sort of quasi-directional level of the universe directing our lives. We then become above that, where we're controlling the abundance, the flow into our lives. And that's really the best example that I can give you. So, for example, a lot of people will create a vision board, all right? And they'll say, okay, this is what I dream of for my family, for travel. This is me represented in the center. This is my business. And this is maybe just the growth. Have different corners of the vision board. What people can now do is they can literally each day invest a certain hour just for themselves. See, we're like hamsters on a wheel, right? We're even worse. We'll just never get off. And the best thing people can do is come back, sit back, get off the wheel, no matter what they've got to do. If you've got 100 emails coming in or 10 appointments a day, invest in self and come back to an empowerment reality where you're literally building your own future and becoming more heart-centered, random acts of kindness, reading great books like, Dr. Wayne Dyer's Everyday Wisdom for Success. I mean, he says right here, every single condition in your life can be improved if you learn to be more effective at visualizing what you want and having the intention to manifest it. That's an incredible quote. And unfortunately, Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's one of my gurus in life and growth, died recently, but his messages really flow on. And it's that realization at the most earthly level that if we invest more in our own flow, our own reality at that quantum level, at the energy level, you will be, bar none, guaranteed more successful in life. The only reason why we are more losing it, or we can't pay our bills, or we can't achieve our dreams, is because we're more plugged in to the propaganda and we're coming away from being grounded with nature. If you do the reverse, I guarantee everybody out there that your abundance can flow more naturally and you can have a more manifested positive life.
So how do quantum computers play into this? What exactly is a quantum computer, and for somebody who does not understand that, how does it compare to just a household computer we may have?
Yeah, so a quantum computer will actually bisect and join different parallel universes. And this really takes a lot to wrap your head around. And in fact, phenomenal scientists like Dr. Stephen Hawking, who's been said by many to be the most intelligent, forward-thinking astrophysicist in the world. And a lot of people disagree, but there's other examples of other philosophers, other physicists out there that have said, Ethan, that you can literally command your own flow at the quantum level by understanding that you can change your reality in the now moment. And the reason that that's possible is because there is multiple universes happening at different time periods on Earth as we understand time, but there are also different Earth universes stacked in this now moment, which is really how time, quote unquote, time happens. So for example, let me say something very bizarre. There are still dinosaurs living on Earth today. You may say, Simon, well, it's just absolutely insane. But what's happening is that they are functioning and living, if you will, at a different dimensional plane that used to be evolutionary on Earth millions of years ago, but it is no longer visible in our dimensional reality. So that's happening at the other Earth universe, but which is parallel and congruent in the third dimensional Earth. And if you lost me there, I may have even lost myself, because it gets so wrapped around. It's like a maze and a labyrinth in a conundrum. And it's like, blah, 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 blah. You almost have to do like, what is going on there? But the DNA evolution is constant. It never breaks. So the DNA evolution of the dinosaurs never stopped. And we say, well, wait a sec, there was a big asteroid that hit the Earth and then it shifted. That's the propaganda of how we explain that we can't see the dinosaurs, or there's no dinosaurs on the planet right now. But there is, at that multi-universal level, where the Earth is literally almost infinitely happening in different dimensions right now in this now moment. That's why we can change reality. That's why there is hope to say to the most desperate person out there listening, if you're feeling so depressed, that once you change your heart, then you change your vibration inside and around you and start affecting the quantum code of everything out there. Because realize this, I'm touching and feeling and looking at you through an entire computer-like vision. It's all pixelated. And that's why some people say we're really living in a hologram. But what it is it's a multi-dimensional parallel universe of an infinite amount of events happening all at the now moment.
I'm curious, of all the places in the world you could have moved, and obviously you're a pretty smart guy, so you had to have a reason to go there. But and prior to meeting you, I didn't even know anybody lived in Uruguay. So why there?
You know, Ethan, to tell you the truth, on April 3rd, 2012, I had one of those telepathic moments, and I've never said that in public. I just say to people, oh, I just dreamed that, you know, I saw Uruguay. But somehow, going back to the very thing, and I'm not embarrassed to tell you this, as a person, as a scientist, as a being, that I literally had that correspondence again from the cosmic journeying entities. And it said very, very clearly on the night of April 3rd, I think it was 2012, you must go to Uruguay. This is where you belong. And I didn't know where Uruguay was. Even after going at that point, I think it was about 65 countries. I knew it was somewhere down in South America, but God, if my geography teacher had given me a quick quiz question, where's Uruguay, what latitude, what two countries was it between? I must have failed. But what happened is we came down here, and the vibration down here, and I've got to go to this term and then come back to real life. The vibration of the air and the people was just completely different to America or Europe. I mean, it was almost like I would walk in the city or at the beach and I'd go, I'm probably pretty famous for doing that now, right? I think we've done that twice on this interview. But it was like, what? Where am I? The energy down here is so much higher that people are literally more heart chakra aligned. There's more laughter in people. Even the weather is calm. There are no physical natural disasters except for a potential small flood or a small drought in Uruguay. There's no hurricanes. There's no tsunami threat. There's no earthquakes. There's no volcanoes. There is no major temperature fluctuations. It's one of those quote unquote near perfect places. There's only 3% of the world that has a climate like this. And the people put their joy field above working. And that is a concept that many of the other places in the world have not yet tapped into. And that's one of the secrets. And so when I came down here, I mean, literally, I had to do like, whoa, like, what are these people thinking? So I'd go back to the States, and I'd literally feel that lower vibration, that panic of, oh, I got to keep working, I've got to do this, and it busy, and then I come back down to Uruguay, and it'd be slower and calmer. Now, granted, Uruguay is not at the top GDP of the world, but because of its success in the joy field, guess what's happening? It's now the number 6 exporter in soybeans, it's 5th in dairy products, and it's the 4th largest exporter in rice. And it's really getting to be on the world scene. Even The Economist last year, or the year before, called it the country of the year. And it's just such a fantastic libertarian, not liberal, libertarian society, to the point where if I'm doing something that doesn't affect you or my neighbor here or my neighbor to the right in any negative way, then we do it. And we understand as neighbors that if I want to have a little party and play my music loud on Thursday night, I'm going to understand that the neighbor has the same right to do that Saturday night. And it's just unspoken, and nobody complains. And these types of principles are multiplied over and over and over in the society down here. And we loved it so much that I am actually now becoming a citizen of Uruguay because I've literally come back home. I realize that probably if you accept the fact that we all have past lives because our energy is never non-existent, in other words, it always is flowing. and we just literally take new shells in different dimensions and different time periods. I reckon that I was here many times because I picked up the language quickly. I felt very, very much a part of the land. And I just kept on telling people, well, I'll be there 6 months a year, which became 8 months, which has become 10 months. And I'm almost here now full time. I just love it. And a lot of other people are picking up on Uruguay too. They come down here, Ethan, and they're like, wow, I didn't really understand what you meant when you said it was a different vibration. But now that I've been there, I truly understand and concur with your thoughts.
I know from we spent some time looking at your cycles the other day. You're going through a big shift right now, a lot of changes in your life. So where are you headed? What are some of the things you'd like to share about the direction your life's going?
Yeah, it's it's like the bigger dreams that I've always wanted to do. In early 2016, I can't exactly tell you what I'm going to do because it's kind of a little secret right now, but I can tell you is that I have received communication from the cosmic journeying entities that I am to take a new type of leadership position that is called a wheel of co-creation. And it's an entirely different type of leadership than we've really seen up to now. It is one in which I am just a part of a wheel that, imagine, is in the center, and it literally goes to each sector around the clock, around the circle, in different types of bonding society together, whether it's in science, technology, infrastructure, education, health, spirituality. And I'm going to reveal this soon, Ethan, that it's, and you're the first, this is the show that I've first announced this on. And all these parts of this new leadership co-creation wheel are designed and added to and made more efficient by the actual society. And the message, the vision, sometimes I don't get a lot of sleep when I receive these sort of visionary things, and I say this in all a humble way, is that this is going to be replicated around the world. And that is the new direction that I am to take.
Sounds very interesting. I can't wait to hear what that's all about in more detail. So can you share with us some of the different, I know your website, your various projects, where people can find out more about you?
Absolutely. I appreciate the chance because it really pushes humanity forward. On Monday nights at 8 p.m., I have been doing for the last 58, 59 weeks a radio show called The Skya Show, SKYAIA show.com. And it's at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's 1 hour long. And we reckon that based upon certain numbers, we're getting 500,000 audience on most nights, which is absolutely incredible. And again, gratitude, namaste to everybody that's pushing this out. And we're going and talking about humanitarian themes like living more of a heart-aligned kind of existence, if you will, and how to create more abundance. I'm also giving more information about what the propaganda is all about. So, for example, we did one show on where China was reporting all those fires. You remember them at the chemical factories? Well, that was the official propaganda story. The real story was that 12 hours after China had announced the devaluation of its yuan, China was literally attacked with a very high energy weapon that is now coming out with more research. And again, go to the alternative media like Zero Hedge, where deep level, very intelligent researchers are connecting the dots and showing exactly what happened. China was attacked, and we are, without a doubt, in my professional opinion as a macroeconomist, we are at a cyber war right now with China. And this is also going to remanipulate or shift the economy. And there's going to be a lot of countries that lose out if they are aligned to the sort of the terror, the economic terror activity of the US and the UK. And so Uruguay, going back to that, has literally been saying now, well, we're not going to be aligned with the US anymore. And I take my hat off to that, because it takes a lot of guts to say to a superpower, well, we don't need you as much as we needed you in the past. And this is more about this freedom. You see, I should not have to be scared or anxious or terrorized for coming on your show and talking about the truth like this, about what's really happening. And in fact, I'm not. I'm raising my vibration. I'm saying I respect you, the US, for whatever you've got to do. I'm not judging you, but I also have the same right as a sentient being, allowing and attaining my own sovereign freedom to tell others about what I think is going on and supporting it with facts and figures. So the Skya show is one of my small little babies, but I'm also at a daily level just helping people through AFC, Advanced Forecasting Corporation, about intenting them more abundance and giving them an edge, Ethan, in threat management.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And I'd love to have you back on the show again a little while later, learn more about what new things you're up to in the near future. And so we'll be speaking again soon. Thank you.
That means a lot to me to be coming back, and so much appreciate you getting this out to everybody. And to everybody listening, a big aloha and namaste.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Awaken Empower TV. Join me next week as we speak with another incredible individual who's standing on the leading edge and changing the world.